At the beginning of summer, I did a brief video demonstrating how to plant potatoes and discussing that you didn't really need to bank up potatoes as you go along. Just plant them deep. The potato is a very large plant. It starts from a very large eye with lots of feet behind it. It's a powerful plant. It can grow up through deep soil as long as it's rich and friable just fine. So when I start potatoes, I typically cut an eye with 1 to 2 cubic inches of flesh. And I just let that dry overnight to help scar up that flesh, which protects it while it's in the ground from pathogenic fungi. And then the next day, I punch a hole into the earth with like the handle of a broom down to 6 inches, as deep as a foot. I'm not really too particular. Drop the eye in there, cover it up, and let her go. And then I come back at the end of summer, and there are potatoes. For those of you who may have thought this can't work, perhaps you've been taught that potatoes have to be banked, I want to cite again the example of large potato farmers. I can tell you, because I grew up on a farm, large potato farmers do not go back and bank up 1,000 acres of potato crop. They plant them deep in friable soil and let them grow. And that's what I've done here. That's all I've done here. In fact, I'm going to show you my bed of New Brunswick Blues, how level it is apart from the holes that I made in it harvesting it earlier today. And now I'm going to harvest my bed of Kennebecks, which just make wonderful fries. If you've never grown a Kennebec potato, in my opinion, nothing makes a better fry than a Kennebec potato. But I've just pulled up a few, and there's going to be more in the dirt, a crate or two, probably closer to 2 crates out of this bed. That's typically what I get out of each 40-foot bed by 4 feet wide, is 2 crates worth of potatoes, which comes up to about 70 or 80 pounds of potatoes. I might actually get a bit more from the Kennebecks, because Kennebecks are a very vigorous grower, much more so than the New Brunswick Blues, which is an old, unusual heritage variety that has blue flesh as well as a blue skin. In fact, even the plant itself is somewhat bluish. I grow those for variety, and I've read that they're full of antioxidants, so it's a healthy form of potato. But for flavor, in my opinion, nothing beats the Kennebec, and this one row is going to yield a couple months worth of them for Daphne and I have yet another row over there I'll get to a bit later on. But point is, planting potatoes this way, it works.
Kennebec potatoes are massive and heavy yielders. The smallest from this hole is about the size of my fist, and I've harvested the occasional Kennebec that's over a pound in size. They are vigorous, disease-resistant, and little taste better, and they're easy to grow. Just dig deep beds, divide the eyes up from each potato, leaving 1 to 2 cubic inches of flesh around each eye, let the eyes dry overnight to help them scab over, and drop them 6 to 12 inches deep, a foot apart, in rows about 3 feet wide up and down those beds. Weed once or twice and come back at the end of the summer, and you'll find yourself knee-deep in Kennebec potatoes. Sometimes I'll plant an entire garden with potatoes. But 2 years ago, I noticed that we were getting a lot of potato bugs in the area, enough that they were damaging the leaves of the potatoes sufficiently that they were impairing the potatoes' ability to grow. So I decided to starve them out, and last year I did not plant any potatoes at all. I hated to do it. I love fresh, organic potatoes right out of our gardens, and our country is good at producing potatoes. But after letting them starve for a season, I replanted 2 experimental beds this year, and lo and behold, I only saw 2 potato bugs the entire season. The potatoes are back to their normal, rich productivity, and the beds that I've planted look to yield somewhere around 150 to 200 pounds of potatoes for us. If I did have an entire garden planted with potatoes, I would go through those beds and dig them up. I'd lose the odd potato that way, but it would be a lot easier on the hands. Since this year, I just have the 2 beds, I'm pulling the potatoes out by hand so I can be sure to get every one. The blue potatoes are funny. It's like digging up Easter eggs. There's a lot more to do this harvest season than just getting potatoes. By noon, I'm done with the potatoes and head out to the meadows to harvest some wild bristly sarsaparilla. The plants will be cleaned, dried, and later turned into tea. But by mid-afternoon, that's done, and it's time to get back to the gardens. There's a lot to harvest, dry, can, or freeze before winter gets here. And next up on the list of things to do is the corn. We had a hurricane blow through about a month ago, and it knocked about half the corn down. But you know what? The corn doesn't care. It's just as happy to grow horizontally as it is to grow standing up. I start harvesting, but Daphne and I knock off around 5 p.m. and touch up a little picnic deck I've been building out in the woods, and it's done just in time for Daphne and I to enjoy dinner there. Produce fresh from the garden, and a free-range chicken that we butchered yesterday. Then it's back to the corn. We'll get several bushels out of our corn patch. As I harvest, the breeze blows, and the corn rattles like old bones scraping. We're coming up on the time of Halloween, and all around us the land is just beginning to turn color. And harvesting the corn among the scraping stalks, well, I have to admit, it gives me kind of a spooky thrill. It just feels so perfect for the season, and makes me think perhaps I should make something like a corn man from the old dry stalks. Next growing season, we'll explore some tips and tricks so you can get good corn harvest too. We'll also explore growing turnips. I like turnips because they grow fast and they're reliable. If you live further south, you might be able to grow rutabaga as an alternative, which will give you bigger bulbs. It tastes pretty similar to turnips overall though. Turnips give two nice crops. There is the turnip bulb itself, and the young tender leaves are also edible and make a nice green. Since turnips are fairly cold resistant, Daphne and I will harvest what we need as we need it through the season, right until we get the first hints of snow or we just happen to be able to finish it up. That way there's no rush. We grow some carrots too, mainly because we like the old red heritage variety. These carrots are ruby red through and through. But we don't grow an awful lot because wild carrots are very common in these parts, and we harvest a lot of them all through the spring and summer. Still, with the domestic carrots, the tubers are reliably good, and they'll go great in some venison stew. We're coming up on deer season, and every year I get one or two. There's a lot more to harvest, and not enough time to cover it all. But don't worry, next year we'll continue with the organic gardening series. Thank you for watching. The Naturalist program is committed to providing you fact-based advice on homesteading, foraging, and gardening, as well as covering all manner of topics related to natural science, from ecology and conservation to the nature of the universe beyond our Earth. If you appreciate the program, please take a moment to subscribe. Subscribing costs nothing and never will, but it sure helps a lot.